Hello everyone, hope all y'all are chilling today. On this early winter morning, we find ourselves in Beaufort, Georgia before the crack of dawn, on our way up towards Gainesville, Georgia, in anticipation for seeing Amtrak.
Wow.
Now, if you know me, you know that I literally could not care less about Amtrak.
What do you mean by that?
It's just not something that interests me.
You're right.
But there was something on this Amtrak train in particular that had drawn my attention. So much so that even before the sun had risen, I found myself up on my way towards Gainesville, Georgia, specifically at the Amtrak station. Here, now that there's more sunlight in the sky, we can see Amtrak's clearance illuminated on the signals over Main 1. The particular train that we are looking for is Amtrak 19, which is part of the Amtrak Crescent route that runs from New York City, New York, all the way to New Orleans, Louisiana.
Incredible.
Quite the journey. And fortunately for us, Gainesville happens to be one of the places that it stops as it makes its way across the East Coast. And so, with clearance given, and it being around that time when Amtrak usually shows up, I would turn my attention northwards for Amtrak 19 to come by with some rather new power leading on the front. Amtrak looks a little bit different today than, frankly, the last 2 decades. And so, with the train stopped, I tried going down to the crossing to get a closer look. But unfortunately for me, there were no passengers that got off here, so the train departed almost just as quickly as it had stopped here. As Amtrak 19 continues down towards its next stop in Atlanta, Georgia, perhaps some of you who are more familiar with Amtrak are wondering, what on earth was running this train? See, for the past 20 or so years, most non-electric Amtrak trains have been driven by General Electric Genesis locomotives. The Genesis series involves 3 locomotives, the P40DC, the P42DC, and the P32 ACDM, which you really only see up in the Northeast. But as for my area here and many others, most Amtrak trains were ran by P42DCs. The P standing for passenger, the 42 standing for 4200 horsepower, and the DC indicating DC traction motors. And these P42 DCs, along with the GE Genesis series in general, has been pretty successful. There were 321 of these units manufactured for the United States and Canada, and they served their purpose well. But all good things must come to an end. As I mentioned before, these things have been running for 20 or so years, which means 1, they are old, and 2, they are dirty. And in the face of a modernizing world, the Genesis is no longer cutting it. So in an effort to increase track speed and decrease emissions, we now have these weird looking units.
What is this?
We can see just by looking on the face that the cab is completely different, same with the rest of the body design. It is still somewhat streamlined, and the light design is
Disgusting.
questionable to say the least. It's on some... But who am I kidding? Considering what Amtrak posts on their official Twitter page,
oh my god,
this is completely lore accurate. Ignoring the visuals here, however, if we look at the trucks of this locomotive, you may see a little green bar over the truck frame. And this green bar bears the company name Siemens. I don't make the rules. Yes, my friends, the same company that manufactured those Transformers that we talked about a while back is back again.
Nice.
This locomotive is part of a class of locomotives called the Siemens Charger class, SC for short. And there are many different models that fall under this series of locomotives. One of the more notable ones is the ALC-44. the SC standing for Siemens Charger, and the 44 indicating 4400 horsepower. And you'll really mainly find these in the Midwest or on the West Coast. However, that is not the engine that we are looking at here.
What?
The engine that we are looking at is the ALC-42. The ALC standing for Amtrak Long Distance Charger, and the 42 indicating 4200 horsepower. And these locomotives, despite Siemens originally beginning their manufacturing in California, have slowly started making their way across the East Coast and phasing out the older Genesis locomotives that we talked about earlier. And there are a few features in this locomotive with improved performance that shows promise over the existing Genesis locomotives. For one, compared to the P42DC that I mentioned before, that could go a maximum of 110 miles per hour, the ALC-42 here is rated at going 125 miles per hour at max speed. Furthermore, all Siemens Charger locomotives are built with Tier 4 engines, which reduce emissions by 70% compared to emissions from Tier 1 compliant engines. And furthermore, it also promises hybrid battery power.
What are you talking about, man?
I wasn't able to find too much information on the specifics of this. If any of you guys know, please feel free to share your knowledge. Anyways, back to the Tier 4 part. Having a locomotive that is Tier 4 emission compliant means that, of course, these Chargers do not bear the same engine as the previous Genesis locomotives that preceded them. And that begs the question, what engine does it have? Well, believe it or not, it is not from GE, nor is it from Siemens. The engine that is inside these Siemens Chargers are from the company Cummins. And the specific engine in question is the QSK95, specifically the one that has been rated for rail service. Cummins offers the same engine type per se for a number of different operations. For rail specifically, the engine can be rated at either 4,000 to 4,400 horsepower, which is why if you look at the different Siemens Charger locomotives, you may see different classifications next to them that indicate the different horsepower. They're all still from the basic QSK95 model here. So, just like in real life, Siemens driven by Cummins.
Excuse me?
I'm so sorry. I know that some of you guys who may have been accustomed to seeing regular Amtrak trains go by may be sad about the departure of these Genesis locomotives. If you're around my age, almost all Amtrak trains that you saw were led by these units. And so it's kind of crazy to see them slowly getting phased out by these newer locomotives. Alas, however, they were gonna go eventually. They definitely serve their purpose well, but they're getting old. They're much dirtier and less clean than what's largely being encouraged in the engineering world today. And being of their age, of course, they're gonna start eventually breaking down. And when they do break down, other railroads have to try to bail them out. And you would rather have a sustainable fleet of newer and more reliable locomotives that can go faster and be cleaner compared to older locomotives that may have performed better in their prime, but now at their age are just becoming a liability and inhibiting service for your customers. That is not to say, however, that the Siemens Charger's development has not been without any hiccups. For instance, within the past couple of years, the ALC-42 that we're seeing here was having a lot of issues out west because during testing when they were trying to first implement these locomotives, the locomotives kept breaking down, particularly in cold temperatures. Siemens eventually responded by saying that there were a number of software and hardware upgrades that they needed to make to the locomotives, and it would appear since then that there haven't been nearly as many incidents compared to the initial onset of their implementation. And thus, no wonder we're starting to see these things pop up all over the place. For those of you who do like the Genesis locomotives, catch them while you can, because the writing is on the wall for their eventual departure from the railroad, in favor of a modernized fleet of cleaner and faster locomotives to move people all across the United States. Will the ALC-42 prove successful? Only time will tell. Until then, I'll just enjoy seeing what I have. Amtrak trains, and just trains in general, running on the rails in front of me. I hope that you guys learned something. If you guys have any new information that I missed, please feel free to drop it down below. And as always, my friends, God bless. I will see you soon out on the high iron.